My teacher whispered honey for the first time right before I learned the truth. Now I understand why her voice was shaking, and why my life has never been the same. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. My sister tried to destroy me with lies, but I came armed with the truth, and her secrets were darker than anyone imagined. I was on a video call with my brother Logan, making casual plans for Easter break, when his words made my stomach twist. He told me our sister Grace had blown up at our parents after announcing she was dropping out of nursing school. Dad had threatened to cut her off, and in a moment of rage she snapped back with, "Well, at least I'm not hiding being gay like she is." And that wasn't all. Grace had shown them screenshots from my private Instagram, twisted everything I'd ever posted, and even claimed I was dragging our youngest sister Anna into that lifestyle. She painted me as some manipulative villain mocking their faith behind closed doors. Mom broke down in tears, Dad locked himself in his office, and Grace played the role of the dutiful daughter, holding Mom and whispering how she'd always protect them. The second I heard this, I jumped in my car and drove straight to Logan's place. Anna was already there, sobbing. Grace had cornered Mom earlier, saying she'd discovered gay content on Anna's phone and hinting that I had corrupted her. My chest tightened hearing that. Grace wasn't just trying to ruin me, she was dragging Anna into her lies too. Logan sat me down and told me Grace was already making moves to secure power of attorney over Grandma's estate, arguing I couldn't be trusted with family matters anymore. It was like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. We realized this wasn't new. Grace had been playing this game for years. She was the one who secretly needed abortion money in high school, but she let Anna take the blame for a pregnancy scare. She was the one who stole cash from the church fundraiser, then let Logan take the fall while she blew it on spring break. That night, Logan pulled up Grace's Instagram. My jaw clenched. She'd built an entire facade of nursing school, posting selfies in scrubs she never wore to classes that never happened. Our parents had forked over $30,000 for tuition while she blew it on concerts and Miami weekends. Anna dug deeper and pulled up Grace's Venmo history, designer shopping sprees, luxury trips, fake grade reports she'd photoshopped to keep our parents fooled. Logan's girlfriend, who happened to work at the registrar's office, confirmed the worst. Grace wasn't dropping out voluntarily. She'd been expelled months ago for paying someone to sit her anatomy exam. And that was just the start. We unearthed emails where Grace had already secured a $50,000 loan in our parents' names without their consent. She bragged to her friends about sabotaging me, laughing that I'd never see a penny of inheritance. She'd even Googled whether being gay could void a will in our state, and complained when she learned it couldn't. Then we stumbled onto the thefts, credit card statements she'd hidden, forged checks from Dad's business, and online listings of Grandpa's belongings. She'd sold his watch collection, war medals, all the heirlooms meant to stay in the family, pocketing $20,000. Logan even found text threads where Grace was arranging buyers for Grandma's jewelry while Grandma was still alive in hospice. We pulled everything together, 3 years of fraud, theft, and lies stacked into a folder as thick as a Bible. Meanwhile, Grace was flooding the family group chat with Bible verses about homosexuality, prayer requests for my soul, and links to conversion therapy camps that bragged about using electroshock. And the cherry on top? She convinced Mom and Dad to invite their pastor and his wife over for Sunday dinner, an ambush disguised as salvation. When I showed up, I was made to wait on the porch. Mom called it God's house now. At the table, Grace sat smugly with a brand new cross necklace, my seat littered with highlighted verses condemning me. Mom's voice shook with disappointment as she accused me of shaming the family. The pastor chimed in with scripture. Grace leaned in with her fake sympathy, acting like she was trying to guide me. Anna squeezed my hand so hard under the table it left crescent marks on my skin. Then the pastor pressed his hand on my head, praying over me like I was possessed. Grace smirked behind folded hands. And that was it. I stood up. The folder thudded against the table, shaking the water glasses. Grace's smile flickered. "Before you lecture me about my soul," I said, my hand firm on the folder, "we need to talk about Grace." The pastor's wife gasped. Mom hissed my name. But I opened the folder. Should we start with the pregnancy, or the forged checks? Grace's face drained of all color. I pulled out the registrar's official letter, the crisp paper loud in the silence. Mom snatched it up, her eyes darting across the words that confirmed it. Grace had been expelled for academic fraud 2 months ago. Grace panicked. Her chair screeched across the floor as she lunged, shrieking that the letter was fake, that I was just bitter. Her hands trembled as she tried to grab the paper back, but Mom pulled it out of reach. And the room? Dead silent. I stayed steady, even as Grace's voice pitched higher, desperate. My fingers found the next stack of papers, printouts of her Instagram posts. Every picture showed her in those cheap scrubs she ordered online, posing like she was living the nursing student life. But each post was time-stamped right during the classes she was supposed to be in. Dad's hands shook as he lifted the pages. His reading glasses glinted under the chandelier as his eyes moved slowly across the evidence. Grace immediately jumped in, voice shrill, insisting someone had hacked her account and planted fake photos. She kept darting glances between Mom and Dad, like she could figure out who might still believe her. Then Anna spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Grace blamed me for the pregnancy scare in high school. Every head at the table turned. Anna explained how Grace had needed money for an abortion, and when our parents found the test, she let Anna take the shame. Mom's face cracked, like she didn't know which daughter to even look at. Grace snapped back, pointing at Anna. "She's lying. She's been manipulated, she's just saying whatever she tells her to." Her finger jabbed toward me like a weapon. Anna's hand found mine under the table again, gripping tight enough to hurt. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached deeper into the folder and pulled out the Venmo transactions. $30,000 in tuition money, siphoned into concerts, designer shopping, Miami weekends, even Coachella tickets. Each payment lined up perfectly with the dates Mom and Dad wrote those tuition checks. I laid them out in front of everyone. The pastor cleared his throat and murmured about handling this privately. I didn't even look at him. I kept spreading the papers like cards in a deck. Dad finally raised his head, fixing his eyes on Grace. His voice was low, controlled, but it had that sharp edge that made the whole room freeze. Have you even been in school this semester? Grace's eyes welled up on command, tears spilling as she pressed her hands against her face. You're all ganging up on me, she wailed, trying to stumble toward Mom for comfort. But Mom just sat there, stiff, staring at the piles of evidence covering her Sunday dinner table. Logan slid his phone across to Dad. On the screen were screenshots of Grace's texts, bragging about how she'd ruined me, laughing about me getting kicked out, saying she couldn't wait for me to be homeless while she collected inheritance money. The pastor's wife leaned toward him, whispering about leaving. He shook his head. We need to stay. Witnesses. I drew in a breath and let it out slow. Then I looked each person in the eye. I am gay. And I'm not ashamed of it. You can use my identity like a weapon, but it won't erase what Grace has done. The room went silent, except for Grace's muttering. Perversion, perversion, she repeated, like the word alone could erase 3 years of theft and deceit. I reached for the next set of papers, the forged checks from Dad's business account. One by one I slid them out. Sloppy signatures, amounts that didn't match, and then the chilling ones, the ones clean enough that the bank had actually cashed them. Dad's confusion hardened into fury. He snatched up his phone, dialing the fraud department without hesitation. His voice was like steel as he told the rep on the other end that he needed to report multiple cases of forgery. Grace panicked, inching toward the dining room door, but Logan stood up, blocking her path. Mom finally found her voice, broken and raw. How could you do this to us, Grace? Grace's whole body shook. She pointed at me again, voice trembling but loud. She forged them. She hacked everything. She's bitter and twisted, she made all of this up. But no one was listening anymore. The papers spoke louder than her words, page after page, detail after detail. Too much to fake. Too much to ignore. I slid out the credit card statements next. The papers whispered across the table as I spread them between water glasses and half-eaten bread. Mom picked up the first one, and her eyes widened with every line she read. A $2,000 handbag from Nordstrom. A list of luxury stores she'd never even stepped foot in. Her hands shook so badly the paper crinkled. Dad grabbed another statement, his calculator app open, punching in totals. His face turned redder with each number. Grace lunged for the papers, but Logan caught her wrist mid-grab, holding her in place. The pastor tried again, voice smooth but shaky. Maybe we should all pray. Dad sliced his hand through the air, cutting him off. Prayer won't fix fraud and theft, he snapped, his other hand still pressed to the phone at his ear. Grace's back was pressed to the wall now, Dad on the phone with the bank, Logan standing guard. Then Anna pushed her chair back with a screech that cut through the tension. She stood, trembling but loud. She's been blackmailing me, Anna said. She went through my phone and found posts I liked about pride. She said she'd tell Mom I was gay too, unless I gave her half my paycheck. The words hit like a hammer. Grace's denials came out in rapid-fire bursts. First Anna was lying, then Anna offered the money, then it was just a loan. Her story shifted every few seconds, unraveling faster than she could stitch it back together. And everyone at the table? We saw it for what it was. The truth was right there, stacked in ink and numbers between us. Grace was cornered. And she knew it. I reached back into the folder and pulled out the papers I knew would hit the hardest. Marketplace screenshots. I laid them down in front of Dad, one by one, careful and deliberate. His breath caught when he saw Grandpa's purple heart listed as sold, $800. The next page showed his prized watch collection gone. 20 grand total. Dad stood so fast his chair toppled backward, slamming against the floor. His fists clenched, knuckles white, and for a terrifying second I thought he might actually strike her. Grace must have thought the same because she bolted for the door. But Logan was already there, arms crossed, immovable. You need to face what you've done, he told her. Grace shrieked that we were jealous of her success, called herself the only good child in this sick family. Her voice cracked on the word good. The pastor and his wife rose quietly. The pastor's tone was grim as he gathered his Bible. This is no longer a spiritual matter. It's a legal one. His wife wouldn't meet anyone's eyes as she whispered that they should have never gotten involved. They left without another word. Dad's voice thundered next, your phone. Your laptop. Now. His demand shook the air. Grace shook her head violently, darting toward the stairs. She made it 3 steps before Mom's voice cut through the chaos. One word. Enough. The command froze Grace mid-step. She turned slowly, her face drained of color. Mom told her to sit and explain the $50,000 loan applications we'd uncovered, the ones filed with their social security numbers. Grace's red-faced fury flickered into fear. Her knees buckled as she slumped into her chair, staring at the mountain of evidence. I spoke calmly, explaining how Logan's girlfriend at the registrar's office had confirmed the truth. Grace had been expelled 2 months ago, not last week like she claimed. She'd paid someone $500 to take her anatomy exam, got caught, and was booted permanently. Every tuition check after that had gone straight into her pocket. Mom's tears returned, but this time they burned with anger. Dad was still on the phone with the bank, jotting down case numbers with a shaking hand. Grace made one last play. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing about the crushing pressure of being the perfect daughter. Her cries grew more frantic when no one moved to comfort her. Dad didn't even glance at her. He pulled out his phone again and dialed another number. "Whitney Maddox, please," he said. "Tell her it's a family emergency involving fraud." He put the call on speaker. Whitney's voice was crisp and unwavering. She listened as Dad explained the forged checks, the stolen tuition, the fraud. When he finished, her instructions were clear. File a police report tonight, freeze every account before Grace drained them further. Grace shot out of her chair, knocking over Mom's water glass. "Don't call the police. I'll pay it back," she cried. Dad's eyes narrowed. "With what? You don't have a job. You don't have a degree. How exactly do you plan to do that?" All she could do was stammer, "I'll figure it out." Then Logan dropped another bomb. He revealed he'd already contacted Grandma's hospice, worried about Grace's attempts at power of attorney. The administrator confirmed someone matching Grace's description had tried to access estate documents the day before. Security footage proved it. Grace screamed he was lying, until Logan pulled up the email confirmation with time-stamped footage. Anna stood then, crossing to Mom with her phone. Screenshot after screenshot of texts from Grace. Threats to out her to their youth group. Links to conversion camps. Messages dripping with cruelty, calling Anna disgusting, promising to ruin her life if she didn't hand over half her paycheck. Mom's face crumpled as she scrolled through. Grace lunged for the phone, but Dad stepped in her way. And then Grace pulled her final desperate card. She pressed a hand to her stomach and announced she was pregnant, that she needed money for her baby. Anna laughed. Actually laughed. Then she pulled up Grace's Instagram videos from just last week. Grace pounding shots at a club, dancing on tables, bragging the next morning about being hungover. Snapchat from yesterday showed her sipping wine at brunch. Every clip date stamped. Grace stammered they were old videos, but the evidence didn't lie. Dad's phone rang again. He stepped aside, jaw tight as he listened. When he returned, his voice was cold. The bank had frozen every account, flagged suspicious activity going back 6 months. Tomorrow morning, they'd review ATM footage of withdrawals Grace couldn't explain. That's when Grace snapped. She lunged across the table, knocking plates to the floor, red wine spilling across Mom's white tablecloth. Logan grabbed her before she could reach the folder. She kicked, screamed, swore she'd ruin us, swore she'd tell the whole church I'd converted Anna. I stood, meeting her wild eyes. "Your threats don't scare me anymore. The truth is out. No lie can bury it now." She spat toward me. It landed on the table, dark and ugly. And then Mom finally broke. Her voice shook the room. "Get out," Grace's shriek echoed. "Where am I supposed to go? You destroyed everything." Dad's voice was colder than I'd ever heard. "You should have thought about that before you stole from your family. 1 hour. Essentials only. Anything else goes on the police report." Grace stormed upstairs, her sobs shaking the walls. A door slammed so hard a framed photo fell in the hall. Mom crumpled into her chair, whispering over and over, how had they missed the signs, how their daughter could betray them so deeply. I sat beside her, explaining how Grace had pitted us all against one another for years, twisting trust and faith into shields for her lies. For the first time since this nightmare began, Mom reached for my hand. Her grip trembled, but it was real. Logan called the police non-emergency line, steady as stone, asking what documentation we'd need. Anna opened her laptop, starting a spreadsheet to catalog every relationship Grace had poisoned. Dad was in his office, speaking to credit card companies, his voice professional but his hands unsteady. Upstairs, Grace raged, throwing things, shouting into her phone about her psycho family. Whitney stayed on speaker, guiding us step by step, ensuring every legal door was locked behind Grace. 20 minutes later, she came thundering down the stairs with 2 suitcases, eyes wild. She dumped them by the door and turned on us. "If you call the police," she screamed, "I'll kill myself. And it'll be your fault." Whitney's voice cut through instantly, calm and firm. "That's classic manipulation. If you believe her, call 911 immediately." Grace's face went scarlet at that. She screeched that I'd destroyed the family with my sick lifestyle, cursed me with God's wrath. But her words no longer had teeth. Everyone in that room saw her for what she was. She yanked the door so hard it smashed the wall, knocking down her graduation photo. Logan actually laughed. Then she stormed out, dragging her suitcases. A minute later, the sound of tires screaming against asphalt told us she was gone. The next morning, Dad loaded us all into the car and drove straight to the police station. We were introduced to Detective Eliza Groves, a tall woman with sharp eyes and steel-gray hair who looked like she'd seen it all. She took the massive folder of evidence we'd built and started leafing through it page by page, her brow furrowing deeper with every sheet. Her verdict? Grace wasn't just dabbling in bad decisions. This was a clear pattern of fraud, felony-level fraud. She questioned us for nearly 2 hours, making copies of everything, her pen scratching across her notepad non-stop. Halfway through, Dad's phone buzzed. His accountant was calling. Dad's face went stiff as he listened, then he put the phone on speaker. A luxury apartment lease had popped up on his business credit report. The lease had been signed 3 months ago in his name, using his business credit card. 12 grand in back rent. Grace had been living there the whole time, calling it her study group apartment. Detective Groves wrote it down immediately. "That shows planning and intent," she said flatly, which only made my stomach sink deeper. From the station, we headed straight to Dad's bank. The manager ushered us into a back office and pulled up security footage. And there she was. Grace, hiding behind oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap, withdrawing the daily maximum from Dad's account, transaction after transaction. The manager didn't mince words. This was textbook fraud. He helped Dad file reports for every charge, saying the police report would strengthen the case for reimbursement. Just as we were leaving, Dad's phone rang again. Whitney. And her voice was urgent. The $50,000 loan Grace had applied for under my parents' names had just been approved. The funds would hit the account by tomorrow morning unless they stopped it immediately. Dad spent 3 exhausting hours on the phone, bouncing between departments, faxing copies of the police report, signing identity theft affidavits. Finally, the loan was canceled, but not without a cost. His credit score took a hit, and Dad's jaw stayed tight the rest of the day. That night, the storm really hit. Grace blew up our phones, first with long, sobbing apologies, begging for help. Then, minutes later, with venom, threats that she'd ruin us if we didn't drop the charges. On Facebook, she painted herself as a martyr. My parents disowned me for protecting my sister from sin. They chose their gay daughter over me, the straight one who tried to save her. Most people saw through it though. Comments trickled in, questioning her story. Meanwhile, Anna couldn't handle the constant chaos anymore. She packed a bag and asked Logan if she could crash at his place. That night, the two of them started contacting the people who'd bought Grandpa's belongings on Marketplace. One older man who'd bought Grandpa's Purple Heart was devastated when he learned the truth. Grace had told him the family needed money for medical bills. The man promised to send it back immediately, refusing even to take money for shipping. He apologized, voice cracking, like he had done something wrong. At home, Mom stayed in her room most of the day, crying and praying. She kept asking what she'd done wrong, how she'd failed as a mother. I sat with her, holding her hand for the first time in months, and told her the truth. Grace's choices were her own. Grace had fooled all of us. Mom sobbed harder, whispering that she felt blind and stupid. I told her Grace had been running cons since we were kids, she'd just gotten better at hiding them. Mom finally asked the question that had been haunting her. Did I think Grace would really hurt herself? I answered honestly, Grace only cared about herself too much for that. The next morning, Detective Groves called with another blow. Grace had applied for credit cards using Anna's name. Thankfully, Anna was too young and the applications were denied, but the intent was enough. It was another felony. Groves asked Anna to come in for a statement. Dad's hands trembled as he hung up the phone. And before we could even catch our breath, Anna came downstairs, pale and shaking. Grace had shown up at her school that morning. She'd been waiting by Anna's car, grabbing her arm, whispering frantically that Anna needed to tell police she was confused about everything. Security had to physically pull her off. Within an hour, we were at Whitney's office. Her assistant, Jeremy, set Anna up with restraining order paperwork, his calm voice guiding her trembling hands. He said the security footage and witnesses would make the emergency order stick. Anna had to write down everything Grace said, including the threats about ruining her college future if she didn't help. By that afternoon, the order was filed. 2 days later, Whitney called with another update. Grace had been fired from her mall job. The manager, suspicious about missing inventory, had checked the cameras. Grace had been processing fake returns and pocketing the cash. They wanted to press charges, adding another felony to her growing list. Whitney sounded almost grimly satisfied. It painted a crystal-clear picture of a serial thief. Dad spent the following morning with his accountant, combing through every transaction. The total damage? $28,000 in forged checks. Another $12,000 in unauthorized credit card charges. Insurance would cover some, but Dad would still lose tens of thousands. He came home looking older, his face gray, blood pressure meds shaking in his hands. That night, the church elder called. He suggested Dad step down from leadership for the sake of unity, since the family's situation was causing division in the congregation. Dad didn't fight him. Just said okay and hung up. Mom broke down again, pushing her plate away, retreating to her room. Later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was one of Grace's old college friends. She said Grace had been spinning a story, telling everyone I'd planted evidence out of jealousy. But once the police report leaked, her friends stopped believing her. She added that Grace had lied about working at a law firm too. She'd actually been unemployed for months. The friend forwarded screenshots of Grace claiming our whole family was homophobic. I sent everything to Whitney, who added it to the case file. The next afternoon, hospice called in a panic. Someone had tried sneaking into Grandma's room after visiting ours, claiming a family emergency. The staff described her perfectly, Grace again. She demanded access to Grandma's jewelry, insisting it was for a funeral. Security threw her out, but not before she made a scene in the lobby. We had to lock down visitation, limiting the list to just us. Logan was so furious he punched a hole in his apartment wall. 3 days later, Mom finally sat me down at the kitchen table. Dad was gone, buried in meetings with lawyers. Her face was raw, her eyes swollen. She told me she'd been thinking about everything and realized something important. Grace's betrayal was worse than anything else. She admitted she still needed time to fully understand my sexuality. But she also said she finally saw the difference between disagreement and destruction. Grace had taught her that. For the first time in months, Mom reached for my hand on her own. Her grip was warm, steady. Did you always know? She whispered. Since middle school, I told her. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I just wish you'd felt safe enough to tell me sooner. The following week, Detective Groves called with news we'd all been waiting for. They were finally bringing Grace in for formal questioning. She showed up at the station with a public defender by her side, and the first thing out of the lawyer's mouth was, "My client won't be saying anything." Detective Groves later told us that move alone made Grace look guilty as sin. Still, without a confession, they had to release her, but not before slapping her with an order, no contact with family members. Grace lasted 2 hours. 2. Then Mom's phone rang from a blocked number. The moment she heard Grace's voice, Mom hung up and immediately called Groves to report the violation. Meanwhile, Logan had been combing through old emails when he found something that made my stomach twist. Grace had been selling our personal information on shady websites, full lists of social security numbers, Mom's maiden name, old addresses. She'd sold our lives off piece by piece for fast cash. By the time we found out, we'd already been hit. My credit monitoring showed 4 attempts to open new accounts in my name that same week. We had to freeze everything: credit, bank accounts, passwords. Logan's girlfriend got us set up with identity theft protection, but she warned us the fallout could haunt us for years. 2 weeks after the blow-up, Dad got a call from an older man who'd bought some of Grandpa's watches on Marketplace. His voice was heavy with guilt. He said he'd been thinking about it and wanted to do the right thing. He offered to sell them back for exactly what he paid, no profit. Dad met him at a coffee shop and came home with 6 watches, including Grandpa's favorite from the war. Dad cried holding it, said it felt like holding a piece of his father again. The man apologized over and over, saying Grace seemed so desperate, he thought he was helping. Dad just thanked him, grateful someone had been honest when our own daughter wasn't. 3 days later, Anna showed up at my apartment pale and shaking. She pulled an envelope from her backpack, Grace's handwriting all over it, crammed with Bible verses about loyalty and forgiveness. Anna had already called Groves, who arrived within an hour to collect it. She photographed everything, told us this was a clear violation of the restraining order, and warned that the prosecutor would add it to the charges. Grace was running out of rope. Anna was so shaken she stayed with me that night, afraid Grace might show up at our parents' house. The very next morning, I finally kept an appointment I'd been avoiding, a therapy session my doctor had recommended weeks earlier. I sat in that office, spilling out everything, being outed, losing my parents' trust, the nightmare of unmasking Grace. My therapist didn't flinch. She reminded me that Grace using my sexuality as a weapon had nothing to do with my worth as a person. She gave me breathing exercises for when the anger surged and told me healing would take time, but I'd already proven strength by refusing to be silent. 2 days later, Whitney called while I was at work. The bank had reviewed all our fraud reports. Good news and bad. They agreed to reverse about 60% of the charges. Dad would recover $24,000 of the $40,000 Grace stole. The rest? Too old to dispute. Still, Whitney said it was better than most cases she'd handled. At least we got something back, though money was the smallest wound Grace left behind. That same afternoon, Mom called to tell me she and Dad had started marriage counseling. They needed help processing everything, how Grace twisted their faith, used scripture like a shield every time she got caught, and pitted them against each other. The counselor told them Grace weaponized their beliefs to escape consequences. Dad was learning to forgive himself for missing the signs, while Mom was unpacking her guilt over raising someone who could cut so deep. For the first time in months, they weren't just arguing, they were really talking. A week later, Whitney called again, but her voice was tight with frustration. Grace's public defender wanted a plea deal, admit to fraud and identity theft, avoid prison in exchange for probation, restitution, therapy, and no contact with us. He leaned hard on Grace's mental health struggles. We had to decide as a family. Logan was furious, he wanted her locked up. Anna said she'd sleep better knowing Grace couldn't reach us for years. Mom wavered, worried about her daughter's future with a felony. Dad, exhausted, just wanted peace. After endless calls and family meetings, we chose the deal, but on our terms. Grace would pay full restitution, no matter how long it took. 2 years of mandatory therapy. 5 years of no contact. 300 hours of community service. And if she slipped once, straight to jail. 2 weeks later, we all filed into the courthouse. Grace walked in wearing a conservative suit, hair pulled back, trying to look like some picture of remorse. But the act shattered the moment she opened her mouth. She told the judge we were persecuting her for being the only moral one in the family. She called it a misunderstanding. The judge didn't buy a word. He looked her dead in the eye and said he'd rarely seen someone show so little remorse after tearing their own family apart. He accepted the plea deal, but not without punishment. He tacked on 500 more hours of community service and mandatory financial management classes. Grace's lawyer tried to protest, but the judge cut him off. Your client is lucky she's not going to prison. She should thank her family for their mercy. That night, I was lying in bed when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting more Bible verses or another plea to change. But this time it was different. She told me she'd been reading books about LGBTQ people and faith, the ones their marriage counselor had recommended. She admitted she still had questions and struggles, but then she wrote something that made my throat tighten. Asterisk, you're my daughter. That will never change. Asterisk, she said, watching Grace's hate had finally shown her what truly breaks a family, and it wasn't who someone loves. For the first time since all of this started, she reached out with something other than disappointment. I cried into my pillow as I texted her back. Asterisk, I love you too, Mom. Asterisk. The next week, Anna asked me to come with her to talk to our parents. We sat in the same living room where that horrific Sunday dinner had played out, and she took a shaky breath. I'm gay too, she said. Mom's face flickered through about 10 different emotions, while Dad just nodded like he'd already suspected. Anna held my hand as she explained she'd known for years but had been too scared after watching what happened to me. Mom started crying, not angry tears but sorrowful ones. I didn't make our home safe for you, she whispered. Dad said Grace's betrayal had taught them that honesty deserved respect, even when it tested their beliefs. Mom hugged us both tight. I'd rather have honest daughters than another Grace. 3 weeks after Grace's plea hearing, Logan invited us all over for dinner to celebrate his girlfriend's promotion. She'd been a rock through everything and already felt like family. For the first time in months, it felt like a real family dinner. Laughter, food, no accusations hanging over the table. Logan raised his glass in a toast, to truth even when it hurt, and to the family bonds that survived Grace's destruction. His girlfriend thanked us for accepting her, said she'd never seen a family fight so hard to stay together. Mom even asked my girlfriend questions about her job, without judgment in her voice. Anna brought her girlfriend too, and nobody made it awkward. Dad leaned back in his chair, pride in his eyes. "I'm proud of my kids for being honest," he said, "even when it's scary." 3 months later, the first restitution check arrived from Grace. Just $200 out of the $40,000 she owed. Dad stared at it a long time before driving downtown to an antique dealer who still had one of Grandpa's watches. He paid $800 to bring it home. The dealer said Grace had told him the family needed money after Grandpa died. Dad locked the watch in his safe with the others we'd managed to recover. Then came my graduation. The whole family showed up in their Sunday best. Anna wore a small rainbow pin on her collar. Mom noticed but didn't say a word. She just squeezed our hands as we walked across campus together. She took endless pictures, beaming, telling other parents, "These are my honest daughters. I'm proud of them." Grace's chair was empty at lunch, but nobody mentioned it. 2 weeks later, while I was packing up my dorm, Detective Groves called. Grace had been arrested in Nevada. She'd tried opening credit cards at 3 different banks with fake documents. This time, federal charges were coming. Crossing state lines turned fraud into a much bigger deal. She'd dyed her hair black and used a fake name, but they caught her anyway. 6 months later, Mom and Dad renewed their vows for their 25th anniversary. Just us kids, Logan's girlfriend, and a simple courthouse ceremony. The judge read something about truth and trust being the foundation of marriage. Mom slipped into her original wedding dress, still a perfect fit. Dad cried as he repeated his vows. At dinner afterward, he raised his glass and said, "Now I know what really matters in a family." The following spring, Anna got her acceptance letter to State University, with a full scholarship for her essay on courage. She'd written about watching her sister tear the family apart with lies while she found the strength to live honestly. The committee called it one of the most powerful essays they'd ever read. That fall, she moved into her dorm and hung pride flags in her window. Logan, ever the planner, chose the 4th of July for his proposal. He got down on one knee at our backyard barbecue, fireworks lighting the sky, and told his girlfriend she'd shown him what real loyalty meant. She said yes instantly. We all cheered while Dad flipped burgers on the grill and Mom cried happy tears. The wedding was set for next summer, and they asked me to stand in the wedding party. 8 months after Grace's arrest, a thick envelope arrived from her lawyer. Her prisoner number was printed on the return address. Inside were 10 rambling pages of her blaming me for everything, calling me names, accusing me of turning the family against her with my gay agenda. I read the first paragraph, then tossed it in the trash without a second glance. 2 years after that cursed Sunday dinner, we all gathered for Thanksgiving at Mom and Dad's. The table was smaller without Grace, but somehow it felt bigger, warmer. Anna brought her girlfriend, Logan's wife showed off ultrasound pictures, Mom cooked all the classics. This time we actually enjoyed them. When Dad bowed his head to say grace, he thanked God for truth, and for the family who chose honesty over deception. We stayed late, playing board games, sharing stories. No secrets. No schemes. The house was finally peaceful. We weren't perfect. Mom still stumbled sometimes, learning what it meant to have 2 gay daughters. But we were trying. And that was more than we ever had back when Grace poisoned everything with her lies. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.